What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host or leader today, or whatever the hell we're calling it. Leaders and legends. Big Ten, baby. Joining me, Brady Quinn and Lazy Douzable. Fellas, what's up? Tuesdays and Brady. Pew, 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 pew.
Oh, yeah.
Pew, 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 pew.
What's up?
Deuce and I are stuck in closets right now.
I know.
Yeah. He's so close, but yet so far away.
Yeah, I was gonna. Are you guys using like a laptop or like what's the deal here?
Yeah. I think laptop.
Yep. Using Bob Brinson's.
I doubt you, Bob. It's a MacBook. He doesn't use me. He tried to switch, and then he was like, "I don't understand how this trackpad works."
But
I don't know why Bob. I don't know what. Like
just
Pete
like you when
Prisco.
he's
I don't.
frustrated?
Yeah. No. Bob's. We need to talk about this. Let's stay focused.
Let's push it forward.
let's stay on the task at hand here, and discuss various matters, like not scoring points. There's no points scored, dude. This is like unders were 10-2 last week. No points are being scored, and we've seen like. I know, remember like when the Rams and Chiefs played on that Monday Night Football game when Jared Goff was on the Rams and
shootout.
But it was like literally every smart football writer, like Kevin Clark, who's my boy, wrote something about it. Like the Wall Street Journal has. I think he was at the Ringer. Like every site was like, "Welcome to the new era of football. Star Wars has changed our lives, and football will be an explosive." It's like okay. Like, there are going to be some good offenses, but there's been good offenses for like 20 years. Like, the Rams were awesome in the early 2000s. And, like, it hasn't really panned out that way. If anything, I think we've seen, like, the migration of some teams saying we can't be explosive and we're going to go to, like, ground and pound. But we've seen the last 2 years, unders have been hitting at a shockingly high rate, the highest rate over the last like 15 to 20 years, and 21.7 points per game this season. That's weak sauce, Brady.
Look, there's a lot of reasons why I think we could, chalk up some of the lack of offensive firepower and scoring and all of that. I mean, you could touch on some of the narratives. Like, hey, we've gone through an era where there's no more Tom Brady, there's no more Peyton Manning, there's no more Drew Brees, there's no more these Aaron Rodgers isn't playing this year, right? He could probably help some of those numbers. We've moved on from a phase of Hall of Fame quarterbacks who are playing for such a long period of time. That's one potential explanation for it. I mean, outside of Patrick Mahomes, who else would you say is a starting quarterback right now is a bona fide Hall of Famer?
That's a good question.
Matthew Stafford, but I mean, like, it's not guaranteed.
But no, and that's where, we'll see, right? And so you kind of leave that question out there and see how people absorb it. I think there's guys who are on their way, but there's questions, right, about like where the quarterback position is at. I have always felt, and Leger, this is what I'd like to kind of throw it to you, is there has been for a long time now, and it's twofold. It's lack of offensive linemen and the way offensive linemen are being coached. I think that directly plays a result in all of this because of so many things. The spread offense, we're talking about like junior high school level, 7-on-7 being more, prominent than actual tackle football at a lot of youth levels. That's had its effect and impact trickling up. And so I think offensive line play, because of the cut down off seasons and cut down hitting and all that, has also suffered due to that, and which has obviously played a role in offensive production, both running the football and protecting the quarterback, obviously in the passing game. So, I mean, do you see that sort of thing? Because I know I see it and feel when I go watch high school games, when I go watch college games now.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Brady. Me and Harry were actually just talking about that in the rundown because I always put little notes in there. I know, Brinson, you see them from time to time. And literally, that was my first point, regression of offensive line. Like, that was my number one point, Brady. And to your point, I don't think it's being coached up as well as it used to be. Like, we see teams that usually have success in the past of the NFL, it was built right through the trenches, right? And now with offensive line play, it's literally like people are literally scouring the streets trying to find offensive linemen, where before, Brady, like, it's always hard to find a good offensive lineman, but you could find them. You know what I'm saying? But now that's not the case because guys, whether it's they're not being coached up right in high school and college level like you. I watch a lot of college football, call college football. There's just not a precipice on it as far as, the technique behind it, because like you said, there's so many spread offenses and quarterbacks getting the ball out of their hands so quick. Like the actual technique of run blocking and then also angles and specific things you need to have success on offense. I don't feel like that's being coached up right. So I think that's a reason why, to your point, Will, we have seen a regression in points, and there aren't a lot of teams scoring, 27 and 30 points a game. Also, I think execution on offense, Brady, you talked about this. Guys don't hit as much, right? So like during training camp, it's a lot different when you're going through walkthroughs and things and practice than when those actual live bullets are flying during real games, right? That's why we always see offenses kind of start slow when the season begins, because a lot of coaches don't even want to put their players in harm's way during training camp. But Brady, when we were playing, there was a callus that was needed to be, built up for you to have that success during the regular season. And now coaches are so scared to lose somebody that instead of guys getting hurt, in training camp, they're getting hurt week 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're having extended injuries. So I think that plays a major part of it, the injuries, the lack of callus building up with the less hitting. And then also I think the regression of O-line as far as it being coached properly, that is a major factor why teams are not having as much success on offense.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and throw in a couple other things. I think schematically too, you're seeing more teams not just play straight man, they're match zones when they play them, in part because the game's gotten more spread out. And when the game gets more spread out and you've got more 3 wide receiver sets on the field, in order to combat that, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you've got guys who are isolated out in space in man-to-man coverage sometimes, where they can eventually be schemed up to, win or create space to create bigger plays. And we've seen a lot softer coverage. We've seen them more probably drop 8, forcing quarterbacks to have to be patient and have to actually read what the coverage is. So there's some scheme to it as well. I mean, I would say this too, RPO, the run pass option, that's so prevalent in college football. You can't really do it at the NFL level. And it's a big adjustment, I think, for quarterbacks who now can't solely look at one defender to get a read on what they're going to do with the football. They're handing it off or pulling it and throwing it. And in part because of, again, 3 yards downfield in college level for ineligible. In the NFL, it's 1. And it's much more strictly enforced too. So you've got all these things that add up, soft coverage, the rules and all of that. And I also think how quarterbacks are being taught is very, very different than how it was when I was growing up playing more under center. 60 plus 65% of the snaps are now taken from shotgun. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can't win and play with rhythm and things like that at the quarterback spot from shotgun, but I grew up, and went to Notre Dame and was playing a West Coast offense where you had a 3, 5, 7-step drop and different things off of that. And the reason why that's important, because you had a sense of timing and rhythm so you could throw with anticipation within that. And you just don't see that anymore. That's something that you always hear as a plus for a quarterback coming to the NFL level is, hey, he throws with anticipation. And you bring it up when you're analyzing college quarterbacks because you're like, yeah, not many dudes do it anymore because it's not a part of the offense. Whereas when you're under center, you knew on 3, your foot hit the ground, man, that ball was coming out. There's no hitching. There's nothing else. When you knew there's certain plays, by my 5th step, I know I'm throwing to my first read or not. And as I hitch up, I'm going to 2. The next hitch is 3, 4. All 3 are drops. Same thing with a 7-step drop. But by when I get to my 7th step, I know whether or not I'm throwing to the first reading the progression. So there's all these things that I think over the course of time, because of the style of offense that we're running, going back into shock and all these things, it's taken away from some of the precision, some of the anticipation that the game used to be played by. And I think the stat that stands out the most to me is the red zone in particular. When you look at the red zone offensive efficiency, it's been coming down now for 4 years, since 2020, averaging about 3.2 yards per play, about 50% efficiency. It's now down to about 45, 46, about 2.8 yards per play. So you've got a spread out offense that's not running the football as effectively. And then down in a short, condensed portion of the field, quarterbacks aren't playing with as much timing and rhythm and anticipating windows like they have to down in that portion of the field. So I think you're starting to see a number of these things display themselves so far this year. And by the way, not playing the preseason probably plays a little bit of a result.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting topic, and it's like we were talking about Brady and I just texted briefly about the quarterbacks from like 2016. I mean, you don't like sorting by touchdown leaders. It's Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, 1 MVP, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady at number 7, and you get to like Derek Carr at 8, Jameis Winston at 9, and you still have Carson Palmer, Eli Manning, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, rookie Dak Prescott, right, and rookie Jared Goff, rookie Carson Wentz, and additionally Russell Wilson, who was still playing at a really high level at that point in time. You had like Andy Dalton and Ryan Tannehill were mid or whatever. So there's definitely that drop off. I sort of wonder, like, what do you guys think? Is the nature of college football and how teams run their offenses and the wider hash marks and all that? Is it like a self-fulfilling prophecy for the quarterbacks and the offensive linemen?
It's not that. It's not that. Like this is to me, and this is one of the things where if you want to get into situational awareness and clock management, game management, it's this.
Exactly.
They go to the sideline for everything. Like,
yeah,
they're not being taught now when they get onto the field to have situational awareness of what it should be and to watch.
You're saying in college the guys are because they're looking at college. Because
you're looking at the sideline. And look, I've had a coach tell me the justification for it. You know, he comes like, "Hey man, let me tell you something. I got a really nice house."
Yeah, I remember he told a story.
Really right? Like that whole conversation, you sit there and go, "Well, yeah, I get it. I don't understand the justification, but." This isn't helping this young man when he gets in the NFL.
Correct.
When that's what he's supposed to be tasked with.
But that's sort of what I mean. I'm saying, like, one, you have these coaches in college, like, dude, if you don't win within a couple of years, in most places, you're gone. So you're not going to be like, hey, like, you're not there to like mold some young quarterback into becoming a great NFL signal caller who's prepared for this high level pro style passing game. Most guys are like, all right, my system runs like this. I'm calling plays like this. And I mean, I feel like Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, who, is old school pro style as it gets, right? I mean, they're still throwing up the cards with like Notre Dame's definitely got a card with your face on it, Brady, right?
To me, that's the disconnect right now in college football and the NFL. Brady, like when we were in school, like your job as a coach was to teach these kids up, right? To empower them. I don't know if that's being done. To your point, Brady, these college coaches are scared now because I mean, college has always been a big business, but more so now, right? Like you said, Will, you don't win in 3 years, like they're ready to get rid of you now. It depends on what your contract looks like because guys like Jimbo Fisher and Mario Cristobal, they're not going anywhere. So to me, that's an excuse, right? Because if you have a deal where you're going to be there minimum 6-7 years, your job is to empower your quarterback or players on your team, period, right? And then also teach them so they can do it themselves. Like you don't need to coddle and hold their hands because like Brady said, like when they get to the league, like that's on you. That's not on the coach. You don't look to the sideline and be like, "Coach, should I check out of this?" No, you have to do that. So I think there's been a disconnect. And you talked about the RPO, right? We kind of saw a shift in the NFL where, like last year, it was big, but now, refs are calling it tight, Brady. Like literally, there's an offensive lineman 2 yards down the field. They're throwing the flag where before Philadelphia was killing teams with the RPO. I mean, the Miami Dolphins killing teams with the RPO, and you don't see it as much this year. And I think, and like I said, Brady, that was a great point that you brought up. I think it's because refs are calling it so tight that the last thing you want to do is put yourself behind the 8 ball and get a 5-yard penalty. Now you're looking at first and 15 instead of looking at, second and 3.
It's funny, I think we always attribute like the RPO to a dual threat quarterback. And I remember Peyton was doing stuff like that back in Denver. Yep. They weren't saying it to anyone, but that's what they were doing. They would be down the red zone and inside the 15, inside the 10. They'd be looking at a defender. He'd be pulling that thing out and slinging that thing if it wasn't there instead of handing it off. So, these are things that, and Rodgers done it. Brett Favre.
Well, but the RPO isn't like the run pass option for the quarterback all the time. Is the quarterback going to hand off and run or pass?
And RPO.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a linebacker. Option. It doesn't have to be an edge play. It's just a run play. And there is a pass option off. Right. That's all it is. And by the way, the offensive line's blocking run because that ball may be handed off. There's no doubt, right? So
that's why you get this ineligible man downfield because it's the guy they're run blocking, and the quarterback pulls and then throws
the ball too long. Which is one of the reasons why, like, really, when you look at who was most successful with it, people hate when I mention the name, but Chip Kelly. When Chip Kelly did it, and you had guys like Sam Bradford ball out, Nick Foles ball out. They were running a lot more outside zone, and that outside zone kind of pulled everyone, and you could hold it because they're all running to the sidelines. And so you were able to have enough time to read that second level defender before a guy got 2 yards downfield. So,
your boy Sam Hartman at Wake Forest, they did that like extended.
That's a different. It's called a slow RPO and a little different, and that's more so the safeties. Basically, the wide receivers get up on the safeties, right? It forces those guys who are 10 yards deep. Now they have to sit flat-footed, and then you got a wide receivers running full speed right by them, which that works at the college level. Until you play a team with a defensive line that just busts through and charges the mesh point, now it doesn't matter. But I think there's a lot of things you can attribute to. I just, it's early in the season. Not playing preseason games where you can iron some of these things out probably has a little bit to do with it. But it's been tough to watch, and we've also are in an era where it's as I would say easy on the offense as ever before. I mean, defensive holding. Defensive pass interference, the way wide receivers are considered defenseless in the act of catching. So as far as throwing across the middle, like it has gotten as easy as it's ever been for offenses to move the football. And we don't see that the scoring right now. We're not seeing it quite as much.
All right. So the 2016 quarterbacks that I talked about, number 1 overall pick that year, Jared Goff. Didn't have a great season in 2016. It's wild too. Like people are like, this guy's a bust. And he goes to the Super Bowl. Like he's in the Star Wars game with Mahomes. He goes to the Super Bowl, and then he's a bust again. The life cycle of a quarterback, man, is just wild. Like people like it is the highest pressure job in all of sports, any sport. And Goff gets traded from the Rams to the Lions. Matthew Stafford goes to the Rams, wins a Super Bowl. So Jared Goff's this bridge guy who's they're just waiting to draft somebody and move along. And all of a sudden, yada, yada. Seinfeld, did you yada, yada 3 years, Brinson? I did. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. Jared Goff's the best quarterback in the NFC right now, Brady.
I mean, statistically, you can make that argument, I think, in the way he's played so far this year. And it's awesome to see. I mean, we talked about this, I think last night as we were texting a little bit. 13-4 of the last 7 games, over 4,400 yards, 29 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 69% completion percentage. Nice. I mean, go find me who's played better in that span. And it's awesome to see for him. We tend to forget, like, he was the number 1 overall drafted quarterback. Like, no one, when he came into the NFL, was, like, questioning his ability to throw the football all around the field. I mean,
the Rams traded a ton to go get him, right? Did they trade with the Titans? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's a talented passer, and you're seeing that now, too, especially with the protection he's getting and the way Ben Johnson has been able to really cater towards his strengths. So I love it. I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the Lions fans and for the Lions themselves. Like, Dan Campbell's one of those coaches that's easy to root for because he's just genuine. Oh, yeah. He is who he is, and he coached those guys to play hard-nosed physical football, and it's good to have them having a lot of success so far.
I know you were going to talk about, like, is there a quarterback crisis, before the Jared Goff conversation, but we kind of, time kind of ran over.
Yeah, but, I think it's like part of it too, though, because it's like Jared Goff is the best quarterback in the NFC, and in 2016, like, the third best quarterback in the NFC was like Drew Brees, which is just, that's a big difference.
That is. But I think Brady made a great point, right? And I wanted to talk about this. It's the coordinators, right? That matters. Coaching matters. We always talk about this, Brady. I think Jared Goff, like you said, Will, when he went there, he was supposed to be more of a stopgap quarterback, right? But they had faith in Jared Goff. They empowered him. And Ben Johnson does a masterful job of spacing as far as letting Jared Goff see the whole field, right? That the way he calls the game on offense, he's one of the top guys in all of the NFL. So when people talk about is there a quarterback crisis, I honestly think there's a coordinator crisis, right? Because Brady, you can speak to this as a quarterback. Like a coordinator's job is to highlight what you do well and really focus in and hone on what you do well, and then also put you in positions to make plays, right? I think Ben Johnson's done a really good job of doing that with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is playing lights out. Honestly, should be in an MVP. It should be an MVP candidate right now. I know I think the rankings right now are Tua, and I think Mahomes is second. But honestly, I think Goff should be ahead of Mahomes, honestly, just from how he's played this year. Well, if you're talking about this year, right, we're not talking about in totality and what Mahomes has done for his whole career. The MVP is supposed to be to the best player this year, right? It's not about what you've done in the past, which, again, does that help you? Of course it does. But I think Jared Goff, the way, and you talked about it, he's probably playing the best out of any quarterback in the NFC right now. I think he's done a masterful job taking care of the football, knowing where to go with the football, throwing with accuracy. And the thing that I liked about him, if you go back to that Green Bay game, in the first drive, he threw an interception. Brady, I always like to see how quarterbacks respond after having an early mistake. Next drive just takes him down, scores a touchdown. So the growth that he's had since he's been in Detroit has been something really great to watch.
By the way, Jared Goff over at FanDuel, just look at the odds. Tua the favorite at plus 330. Patrick Mahomes plus 340. Josh Allen 6.5 to 1. Jalen Hurts 8.5 to 1. Brock Purdy 10 to 1. Lamar Jackson 14 to 1. Trevor Lawrence 19 to 1, and Jared Goff also 19 to 1. I don't hate that at 19 to 1.
Crazy.
The way the Lions are playing, they could easily get the 1 seed in the NFC.
They look like the best team in the NFC North.
I agree with that. I said I agree with that.
Yeah, it's like they could kind of skate through, and
if you put the Lions in, and I've said this all week, but take this Lions team, take off their jerseys, put Cowboys jerseys on them, and they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl. Goff's 5 to 1 to win MVP because it's people just aren't willing. There's just some kind of
you're waiting to see, you're waiting to see if the Detroit Lions.
When's the other shoe going to drop on the Lions? It's just not dropping.
Right.
This is a good football team.
We're 6 games in the season, right?
I think we can make definitive statements.
Brady, you still like your Vikings?
No. Well, here's what I'll say with the Vikings. I'm not. I'm just saying they won their own divisional game they played, so that they can still be competitive. Without Justin Jefferson, different story. So we'll see, because it doesn't sound like he's going to come back anytime soon. I would just say this, though, 6 games into it, just be careful. We got 11 games left. There's a lot of teams at 500 that I'm I don't know, man. I can see them turning things on, getting hot here. And we know how the NFL schedule is set up. They want to have all those divisional games at the end of the year because they know that's ultimately what's going to dictate things.
Absolutely. Speaking of the Vikings, let's talk about the AFC's version of the Vikings.
I like that. Was a smooth transition, Will.
Thank you. And Justin Herbert. I mean, this Chargers team cannot not play. It's the Vikings are look, I saw somebody tweeted out. It was let's just fast forward to the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter of the Cowboys Chargers game. Someone's going to be up 3 points. Someone Dak or Herbert's going to have the ball, and we're going to make outlandish statements about their career based on what happens on the final drive of the season. But, dudes, the problem here is Justin Herbert is now, I believe, 0 for 3 when holding the ball, trailing by 3 points with inside 2.5 minutes, I think, so far this season. Is Justin Herbert anti-clutch? So
me and Brady just had this fun social media thing that we did, right? And we were talking about different quarterbacks. And Brinson, I brought this discussion up to you last night because everybody knows I'm a big Jay Herbo fan. Justin Herbert's thrown more touchdowns and passing yards than any quarterback in NFL history in the first 3 years. I'll one up your stat that you just gave, Will. Justin Herbert has thrown 13 interceptions in the fourth quarter of one-score games, going back to the year he was drafted in 2020. That's 5 more than any quarterback since 2020 in that span. I hate to say it, he is anti-clutch right now. I mean, Brady, we know this. The film will show you what you are. Now, again, are all interceptions created equal? Of course not. If you look at the interception that he had for Stephon Gilmore, Quentin Johnson as a receiver has to do a better job of fighting back towards the ball. He essentially got punked by Stephon Gilmore right there for that interception. And Stephon Gilmore is a guy that people need to talk about potentially going to the Hall of Fame. That's the type of career he's had. He's very savvy as far as getting the football away from quarterbacks. But we saw it in week 1 versus Tua, right? He scores a touchdown. Tua has the clutch gene, goes down there and throws an absolute dime to Tyreek Hill for 40-plus yards, and then throws another dime to him on a fade in the back of the end zone where I don't think you could throw a better ball, Brady. So Justin Herbert has a chance to be the hero, and he doesn't get it done in that game. So it sucks to say because I know people have been at me and at my neck Tua's more clutch than Herbert, and I'm we haven't seen Tua in the playoffs, though. And the one time we saw Justin Herbert in the playoffs, they were up, 3 or 4 scores and lost that game too. So I hate to say it, he's not clutch right now. He has to prove it otherwise because that stat was alarming when I saw it. 13 picks in the fourth quarter at, I believe, in 1-score games. That's not a fun stat to read, Brady.
Yeah, it sounds like they need to play less 1-score games and be up maybe in the fourth quarter, right? You don't have that problem.
Yeah. Top 3 in the NFL in both the Phillip Rivers and the Justin Herbert era in 1-score games. This team is who they are, and they're going to do. It's you're stuck in 1-score hell for perpetuity if you're a Chargers fan. I don't know if Philip Rivers dragged a bunch of NC State bleep out to the West Coast with him and like cursed this team, cursed this franchise forever. I don't know. I don't think that's the case because like the Chargers had stuff before. Like, dude, I thought it was the weakest sauce move of all time for Archie Manning to step in and be like, my son's not playing for this franchise, but he wasn't wrong.
He might have known something.
Yeah, Eli's got 2 Super Bowls, and I think he's probably thankful. Correct. You know?
By the way, no, I'm getting this from the Twitter account. I follow it. It's at TB_facts. It's like a Tom Brady facts Twitter account. They actually have good. I'm just giving you but they went and the proprietor of the account went and did, instead of like, because you can sort by number of game-winning drives, but that's a little misleading because it's like, you know, some guys have more opportunities, right? So like they sorted by percentage of game-winning drives. Tom Brady, ridiculous 72 of 127. That's 56.7%. Like that is an outrageous number of conversions on his attempts at game-winning drives. Vince Young is actually number 2, but it's like 13 to 23. You have Mahomes, Andrew Luck, Elway, Peyton Manning, Nick Foles, a small number 2, Garoppolo, a small number, Big Ben. You know, you just see like when you look at it checks out like anecdotally. Like Stafford's kind of up there. Herbert is right behind Drew Brees at 43.3%, 13 of 30. I think that's probably too small a sample to definitively say anything either way. But like the eye test and the Chargers test does say, man, this team can really lose a football game late.
Yeah, you love fixating on this team and this franchise because you did for so long when your
I've moved on.
Rivers was there. I don't know.
I broke up with him when Rivers went to the Colts. I became a Colts fan, and now I'm a Stafford fan.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dude, I got enough pain in my life in college. Okay, I don't need.
I have something funny to talk about. How about that fan that everybody thought was a bot that was a hired actor for the Chargers?
I could have sworn I've seen her as an extra in a movie. I'll say that. I could have sworn I've seen her as an extra in a movie or something.
Talking about breaking up with teams.
And it was like, it was almost like they could have like paid her to like go there and like just be like the anti Taylor Swift. Like this is like the Chiefs have Taylor Swift and we have an extra from Deep Blue Sea or something. By the way,
great reference, by the way.
Thank you. Sharks.
Is that what LL Cool J is the chef? And he actually and his final words were, "Take me back to the ghetto." At the very end.
those are those exact words.
I'll never forget it. I was like, God, I love LL Cool J, man.
There's some line about it's like the Sharks.
The
Sharks are intelligence.
Like the Sharks are swimming backwards.
The Sharks are self-aware.
I never really understood why it was so big that they could swim backwards. I'm like, they just turn around pretty quick. I'm not really sure.
It's like, oh, a shark has reverse. Oh no, like that dude will whip around and get you.
That thing to put them over the top.
It was like when we started like walking, they're like, oh, they're walking upright. Like, yeah, the sharks now are swimming. I'm like, I think the sharks now are pretty badass. I wouldn't want to.
Have you ever been swimming with a shark?
This past summer, we were out on the boat, and I was with my kids out at a sandbar, and someone had yelled, "Hey, there's a shark nearby." They kind of pointed the direction where it was at, and sure enough, I was literally launching my kids like into the boat, throwing up from the water.
You're launching them back into the boat, right?
Into the boat, yeah. And I'm like sitting there, kind of looking around. I got up in quick, and then we stayed out of the water probably for the next 20, 30 minutes, and we saw it. It was probably at that point about 50 feet away, and then someone actually came up really close to the boat where we were at. We were anchored, tied up with another boat, and they ended up taking a picture of it. But it came right along the boat, and it was a decent size little bull shark. So that was the closest encounter I can say I've ever seen.
Those are aggressive.
Oh yeah, I was like the worst thing as a father, like thinking one of your kids get bit by a bull shark.
First time I ever went scuba diving with my dad in the Caribbean. Our dive master, we jump in and we're down. We're like at like 40 or 50 feet, and the dive master like pulls out. It's been decent depth, right? Like,
you can't. What people don't know is you can't rush to get back up to the surface.
No. When you're maybe 60, whatever it is, like you're there, and whatever else is there, you're hanging out with it for a while. So the dive master pulls out this 2-liter Coca-Cola bottle. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And starts rubbing the sides of it. Well, apparently, when you take it, because like the pressure compresses it, and when you rub it, the sound it makes is like similar to a dying grouper. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, an 8-foot hammerhead comes flying out of like the darkness. I don't, but great question. I think to scare me, because like my dad starts looking around for me and he can't find me. And I'm just like holding on to like my dad's fins behind him, just like peeing in my wetsuit. Like, what the fuck? I didn't sign up for this.
Is that the last time you crapped your pants, Will? Is that the last time?
No. I don't know that. No, I didn't. One, I think that's the answer. I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I peed in my wetsuit for sure.
All right, who pooped in their wetsuit again? All right.
What is that floating in the ocean?
I have been pooped on by a remora, which is like a parasite, but that's a whole different story for a whole different day. We should probably take a break. And when we come back, who might be shopping around at the trade deadline? We will tell you coming up next.
The best bull riders come together.
Only get one life, so enjoy the ride.
To crown a Team Series champion.
Just live your life, one day at a time. And enjoy the ride.
On CBS Sports Network.
It's October, which means, oh boy, why is my brain is such a little tiny like squirrel? It's like I almost took this in a totally different direction involving involving like the South Carolina Gamecocks. Do you know what they call it? October?
What do they call it?
The Gamecocks call it. Yes,
I got it.
Now, but like I see Josh Pate, our colleague, tweet about this, so I think it's fine to call it Cocktober, right? Like,
I mean, you said it either way.
yeah, I guess I didn't stop myself. It could be Brocktober for the 49ers. Hadn't gone very well for South Carolina or San Francisco or anybody who likes pumpkin spice lattes. I bet, Brady, you're a pumpkin spice guy.
Never in my life.
You never had one pumpkin spice latte?
Never. First off, I'm not a big pumpkin anything fan.
Yeah, me either.
Maybe with the exception of pumpkin pie, which I'm not a big pie guy. Like, I don't really like stuff like that. So
yeah, cake man, aren't you?
No, I'm not a cake eater either, Will. I know you you like to eat your cake and have your little tea and all that too while you're eating and drinking your little tea. So
I'm really more of a creme brulee guy, but whatever.
There you go. Isn't it creme brulee?
I'm just kidding. I'm a cookie man. Falling leaves, football, Halloween. God, Halloween's right here too. And trade deadline, which is actually on Halloween.
What?
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Thank God the trade deadline's not like on April Fool's Day. I hate April Fool's Day. Worst holiday on the planet. We got Bradley Chubb, Christian McCaffrey, Roquan Smith, Calvin Ridley, all traded last year. This is big name trades. Yeah. Let's talk who should be buyers and who should be sellers. Brady, you can go first. Who should be a buyer at the deadline, and what should they be looking for?
Here's the hard thing about answering this question. And when I was thinking about this, if you're a team that's got a losing record, right, we would all assume they should be buyers because they would be wanting to load on talent to try to make a run, or maybe you're 500 or something like that.
Yeah.
The problem is like, unless you need a skill position player, like it's going to be such an expensive move to make.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why you don't see a ton of buyers in football. That on top of the fact that it takes them oftentimes really long to allow that player to like work into the system and have the impact that you're hoping for. So I think there'll be more sellers than buyers, but I think much like the housing market right now in this economy, you're not going to see a whole lot of movement. Like you're just not going to see a whole lot of transactions taking place.
Interest rates to the like having to like the cost to acquire, and then like the acclimating the system, which would be the interest rate too high.
Yeah, the cost of debt obviously right now is impacting the housing market. We can get off that subject, but to your point, draft capital.
Whatever you say, Dr. Quinn.
Yeah, draft capital is like your interest rates, right?
Yeah,
and what they're asking is going to be far too high. So, I'm when I was thinking about all right, who would be big buyers, I'm like, oh well, New England or some of these other teams, like maybe Minnesota or maybe someone else like that. Where Kirk Cousins said, like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. And, like, they've only played one divisional game. Maybe they feel like they want to try to keep loading up. Denver, given the position that they're at, the wide receiver play hasn't been stellar. Everyone wants to throw shade on Russell Wilson. Outside of this past week, he's actually played well this year. He has not been the problem there. So Denver's cutting guys loose. Do they look to bring anyone in on defense? Or is it like a team like the Miami Dolphins who's up as one of the best, but could they add on a couple more pieces? It's hard to predict this. I don't really have any like hard, like this team's a buyer. I mean, right now I'd say this. I don't know how much longer Deshaun Watson's going to be out with his shoulder injury. PJ Walker didn't look great last week. Dorian Thompson-Robinson didn't look good before that. They might want to look at trying to find a backup or someone they do feel good about going after and getting, because that defense is the best in the league or up there next to San Francisco. And that might be the thing that holds them back from having a better seed or a potential playoff spot.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've got, like, you look at this, it's the part of the problem for the NFL with the trade deadline is we start these talks, we finished 6 weeks of football, right? And as you point out, like the Jaguars this time last year were 2-4, and the Jaguars went on to win the division and make a big run. So you can't definitively say, and they acquired Calvin Ridley, but he couldn't play. You look at the AFC, and you can go down as far as the 14th team in the AFC, the Tennessee Titans, at 2-4. I mean, they're 2 games out of first place in their division. Like, the Titans are going to be like, well, and now maybe if Ryan Tannehill was out for the year, you consider something different if you can get like actual value in return. But Mike Vrabel's not I'm going to give up and just call the dogs off at 2-4 type of guy. I don't think. So really, like New England and Denver on the AFC side, especially if we're having a 4D chess battle between Bill Belichick and Sean Payton for tanking, which may or may not be the case.
Yeah, but by the way, who are you tanking for?
Exactly.
I know. Caleb Williams suddenly like 3 picks in the first quarter against Notre Dame.
It hasn't been 3 picks. He hasn't played well this year, especially when under duress and under pressure. Go look at the stats. I mean, it's and when you put on the tape and you watch it, you're like, all right, if we can get to him, he hasn't played as well.
Yeah.
Hey, Drake May, he's fine.
I'll put it this way: a lot of people that I've talked to, some have Drake May higher, and it's not something that they advertise. Yes.
Oh. May has been a lot better the last 2 weeks since he got Tez Walker back too, and Tez Walker plays a similar spot to like Josh Downs. Like Josh Downs was his guy last year.
He's been great for Indy, you know.
Yeah, exactly. On the NFC side, actually, we'll stick on the AFC side, dudes, because you've got look, your team 3-3. I mean, there's talk about Aaron Rodgers coming back. Let's be realistic.
I think more so, Brady talked about who's going to be buyers, who's going to be sellers. I think it's still too early in the season to determine that. But I think, there could be player swaps that make a lot of sense for both teams. So essentially both teams are gaining something by swapping out players. I think the Jets swapping out Carl Lawson for Hunter Renfrow makes a lot of sense. I mean, Randall Cobb has struggled in the slot for them. Now we know he's Nathaniel Hackett's guy. He could be a guy that's going to be a leader, but they've needed more out of that slot position. I think we talk about Garrett Wilson, right? And I love that they've almost force-fed him the ball the last couple of weeks. He's been upwards to 12 targets per game like the last two weeks. I think they still need something in that slot. They're missing something in that slot. Hunter Renfrow essentially not being used at all with the Las Vegas Raiders right now because they brought in Jacoby Myers, who plays a lot in the slot as well. I think that makes a lot of sense. The Jets have a very deep D-line. Yes, they did restructure Lawson, so you got to see and tinker with that to see what that looks like as far as training, player for player in regards to Hunter Renfrow and Carl Lawson. But to me, that makes sense for both teams. The only thing is they play in about 3 weeks. So would they be willing to make that trade knowing that they're about to play each other, or do they wait till right before the trade deadline to do that swap?
I think the other thing is with the Jets is like, are you really building things for this year? I mean, if I'm the Jets,
Rodgers is walking around in week 5 throwing footballs.
Yeah, but I mean, I get it, but then it begs the question: like, are you still in the playoff hunt if he could come back by week 15? I don't know. But the other thing is like you're going to pay a premium if you're a buyer right now, right? Like there's not going to be a lot of
Well, that's why I said the player for player swap makes a lot of sense here.
Well, again, and that's a theoretical player.
Yeah,
I'm more presenting the point that. Like, I think a team like that, like, I'm not sure that they're really trying to if they do anything, think about this year more so than the actual future. And so then you've got to take into account, like, what's the contract situation of the person you're trading for. And
I think they're both technically free. I know Hunter's free after this year. And I think, Carl, you can get out of his deal after this year.
Well, let me ask you this. And this is sort of like not directly related to the trade deadline, but I mean, it's also like, let's say, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen. Aaron Rodgers comes back and plays in the playoffs. Like, I think that's insane. Like, this is not an ACL would even be pretty tough, but an Achilles, man, like at his age, I understand he's ahead of schedule and all that. If Zach Wilson gets him to 9 or 10 wins and Aaron Rodgers can play in the wild card, is he like, I mean,
Well, let's do this. Look at their schedule.
Yeah,
They're a 3-3 football team right now.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like, what number do they need to get to? 10 wins? I think you have to
Probably
assure
10.
yourself.
But if I would say,
I think 10
uh,
in the AFC
11,
doable.
11, you'd have to say for sure you're getting in.
for sure.
10, it might be still iffy, right? You have to win the right 10. So
Yeah.
go through the rest of the schedule.
Chargers at home, one of those big 10. Like, like you beat the Chargers at home, I mean, in 3
gotta win that
weeks.
one.
Like, yeah.
They have the Giants next, Chargers, then Raiders the next 3.
So they can win 2 out of the next 3. Like,
Yeah,
this is the
They
5.
could possibly win all 3. I mean, I think with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, them going 3-3, I think people are going to say that was going to be a tall task just because of the schedule and how it came out. So I think with Zach Wilson going 3-3, you look at it and say, while defense is still playing top level now, they've given up too many yards, but we're getting the turnovers that they weren't getting last year, right? So as long as you can continue to get the turnovers, and you would think without having Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed and those guys coming back, that they would elevate their game too as well. So again, Zach Wilson, has he taken a step? Yes, right? Do they need him to continue to take steps? Obviously they do. But as long as he's not turning the football over with that defense, you still have a chance in any game.
So they've got those 3 games: Giants, Chargers, Raiders. Then they have at the Bills and the Dolphins at home. I think if you can be 6-5 through those games, then you consider yourself very much a playoff contender with Falcons, Texans at home, at Dolphins, Commanders, at Browns, at Patriots to close out. Like,
yeah, I mean, so
you
the
may have
schedule's
to beat-
favorable down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, like at Browns, at Patriots is not a great way to close it. Like if the Jets have 8 or 9 wins going to New England with a 19 game losing streak on the line, like that's
Like
the
that
playoff.
streak, I was so sick that they lost that game. And that game, honestly, Brady, and we talked about this, that game might come back to bite them this year, literally.
I mean, if they lose both times to them, I just, good heavens.
If Belichick, that's like Belichick's Super Bowl. If he knocks out, it's like Belichick loses the number 1 overall pick, but like takes the
especially
Jets
if
out
they
of
only have like 1 win going into that game versus us, like versus the Jets. Like,
yeah. All right. Other possible buyers, Brady. Let's say you're the GM. I could see either one of you guys being GMs. It'd be fun. Just like mostly like I want to see Brady's a GM just so he's like antagonized by local reporters. Like I feel like dudes, you don't want to be the GM of the Jets. That seems like a job. It's like you're just asking too much of a human being's soul to be the GM of the Jets for a long haul. If you're like the Atlanta Falcons or the Washington Commanders, right? You're running those teams 3-3, or like the Chargers. Just don't want anything to do with it. Packers, Vikings, like one of these teams where they're on the fringe of the playoff race. Do any of those teams interest you, Brady, as a possible buyer?
I think the Packers would potentially, but like they're not even a big player in the offseason or free agency. That just, I mean, I know Brian Gutekunst had that 1 year, but that was about it. And so it's hard to think that they're going to make some big splash or big moves. Teams seem to want to look into the players that they have. The Vikings are an interesting team, but they've got a lot up in the air too. When you think about after this year, Kirk Cousins becomes a free agent. He's already reportedly said he's not going to waive the no trade clause. He wants to stay in Minnesota, so he's not going anywhere. Maybe they can hang around and stay competitive once they get Justin Jefferson back.
Should they trade Justin Jefferson?
I don't think so. I mean, my thing is he's too good of a player, whether Kirk Cousins is there after the season or not. And so if you're going to go take a quarterback in the draft, you better have 2 guys to throw to in that sort of offensive firepower with Kevin O'Connell calling plays. So I just think it's interesting. Like, I think Minnesota's kind of curious to see what next year looks like. I think a lot of the teams that you named are in that position. So it's hard to then want to go all in on trying to make some last minute moves. Like, I think you're either looking at buyers being teams that are already strong, maybe already in the running, or like can get someone who they're just trying to cut for cap space purposes or whatever the case is the rest of the season, like a la the Denver Broncos. Like, hey, Frank Clark, they're letting him go. All right, sweet. I mean, if you're that was just an example of like an edge rusher that's played well, extremely well in the postseason. And if you're a postseason team, you're now a buyer, right? Like you're invested into this. So maybe like a team like the Lions or something, there's some of these teams that I think are right there that are 5-1 that want to get over that hump, or maybe a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, like, someone wants to part ways or move on from another wide receiver they feel like could maybe come help. Great. All right, let's go find ways of bringing him in to help us be that much better. So I just, it's tough to get a sense for like who that's going to be, because I think there's only a handful of teams that maybe even fall into that category.
Dudes, the Panthers are a team that 0-6, gonna be They're done. Don't have a first round pick. Need to get some draft capital back.
Yep.
Any possible partners for the Panthers?
Yeah, I wrote one down. I would love to hear how Brady or what Brady thinks about this. The Bills, they lost a really good linebacker, Matt Milano, right? Frankie Louvu is a free agent after this year. Now, again, they could see him as part of the future.
Like that.
I love the way that he's been multiple as far as being an edge guy and in the box linebacker. I think a guy like Sean McDermott would love to have him on his team, a guy that he can line up all over the place. I think that makes a lot of sense, depending on if Carolina doesn't see him as a piece for the future, which they probably do because he is a really good player. But if they could maybe get him for maybe a third round or maybe a fourth, fifth round pick.
Damn,
he's played really well, Brady. You talked about it. What teams are selling right now, they want teams to overpay for a player. And we talked about it. The Bills feel like they're a Super Bowl contending team. And if they feel like maybe, not having Matt Milano, if we get Frankie Louvu in here for 1 year, are we willing to part with a fourth or fifth round pick, to get him?
Yeah, I think in this case, you're saying like this sixth round, some, kind of later on. But to your point, I think that's the right track, right? Like you got the Buffalo Bills who clearly been decimated with injury. Go call up some teams, see if they're willing to.
Panthers and Bills have the connection with Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean, who was there in Carolina. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and then we're going to very quickly make some Thursday Night Football picks next.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
At the Saints on a short week, the Jags have been London reinvigorated them. Brady, Trevor Lawrence, knee injury, sounds like he's going to play.
Yep.
Tough defense to play against.
Tough defense to play against. And look, the Saints defense has been playing well. It's their offense that I'm more concerned by. I mean, for what that roster looks like, that team has not been able to kind of click and get it all together. And Deuce, we were talking about this earlier today. Like the Jaguars defense has played pretty well. So this is one where, look, even if Trevor Lawrence doesn't do a ton because of the knee being immobile, lean on Travis Etienne. I think Lawrence can make enough throws to get this team to be able to cover the number. Which in this case, I think what they giving a 1.5 or they giving
it's actually moved. It was Saints -1. The theory was like we don't know about Lawrence. It's actually moved to Saints -1.5, which is kind of interesting.
I look at this game. You talked about it, Brady. Trevor Lawrence. We'll see where he's at. He's actually the best quarterback currently this season as far as pass yards, on the move outside of the pocket. He's thrown for over 300 yards. So you would wonder if that knee kind of stopped some of that. We know this defensive line where Grandison and Cam Jordan can really get after you. So I'm with you. I think the Jaguars have always been better when they've leaned on Etienne, right? I believe 5 out of 6 games he's had at least 20 touches, and they're 4-2. One of the games that he didn't have it was the loss to the Chiefs. Texans game he had it, but they were kind of down big in that game. So, those touches kind of are misconstrued. So I think they really need to lean on Travis Etienne. We talked about the defense, the ascension. Josh Allen playing like it's a contract year, right? 7 sacks already this year. Will he get after Derek Carr? And let's not forget, Ryan Ramczyk is banged up. James Hurst. They could be without 2 starting tackles. So that could be feasting for Josh Allen on the edge because we know Trevor Penning has struggled when he's been a starter this year. So that's something to really watch as we go through this week of practice. I doubt that Ramczyk plays because the NFL has been real, pertinent as far as concussions, not bringing guys back without, a 2-week span. He just played this last week in the second quarter, got a concussion. We'll see where Hurst is with the ankle. Hasn't practiced up until this point. So I think the big concern for the Saints is their red zone offense. It's just been abysmal. It's been really bad. Derek Carr had his best passing game last week, and they lost to the Houston Texans. So it was good to see him be able to air the ball out. They got to figure it out with Alvin Kamara, too, because he's in a career low in touches, but yardage per game. I think 3.8 yards per touch this year.
0.75 yards per catch.
That is the biggest thing. Crazy. Brady, we talked about this earlier in the show. The red zone efficiency has been brutally bad in all the NFL. The Jets have been abysmal in it. The Saints have been abysmal in it. Something has to change for the Saints in the red zone if they want to compete and win that NFC South.
10 of 13 games this week have a total of 45 or less, including this one, which currently a total of 39.5. There's a bunch of totals under 40. Who you got? You want to go total or side? We'll get you out of here on this, guys.
Yeah, I think I picked a bunch of these earlier. I'm trying to look back through, but I believed I liked the over. And I know unders have been the trend the entire season. Like that's sorry, I'm trying to look back through my email where I put it. Actually, no. This is one of the only ones I went with the under. So
I was like, I'm definitely taking the under.
Saints unders have been cashing.
no Saints.
Short week. Trevor Lawrence banged up.
I have to go back and look. I think I put that in my email. I'm not sure, but the point is this is like this is an overreaction this week with where the lines are set to how things have been this year. Unders have been cashing in all year long, not just with the Saints, but like predominantly the majority of the games have been hitting the under. So I think this week we get a little bit more scoring going on too. We start hitting some of those overs. So I took the under in this game, but I think for the by and large for the rest of the games, the overplay is probably better.
All right. Anything on the side of total?
The only team in the NFL that the under is hitting every single game they've played in this year, if I'm not mistaken. So you look at that, you look at Trevor Lawrence and being banged up this year. I love the under. And then you just look at the trend of Thursday night footballs. I believe besides that Commanders Chicago game, I think almost every game on Thursday night is hit under. Yeah. So I'm not picking a side. The numbers have fluctuated too much, too many injuries. I like the under in this game.
I dig that under as well. Don't care what the total is. Get down to 25. Don't care. All right, that'll do it for us. For News, for Brady, I'm Brinson. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, rate, and review. Hit the like button, and we will see you tomorrow for our Week 7 Picks Show. Bye.